attention. Hi. So my name is Chris Green. I'm the Executive Director of the Animal Law and Policy Program here at Harvard Law School. We'd like to thank our partner organization for helping organize this event, the Harvard Animal Law Society. I've got several members in the room today. And as many of you may know, we started our new Animal Law and Policy Clinic just this September. And yesterday was a big day. We actually filed our first lawsuit, and Bowen Wassing's in the room, was very much involved in that case. Suing the USDA over failure to reply in a timely manner about a petition on the primate psychological well-being for animals used in research. So the Boston Globe did a big story about it yesterday, so we couldn't be happier about that. And part of the reason the Boston Globe did a story is because this year we also hired a wonderful new communications manager, Sarah Pickering, who actually has worked with Leah in several other capacities. So I'm going to hand it over to her, and she's going to introduce our speaker, Leah Garcés.
Thanks so much, everybody, for coming. It's a particular pleasure for me to introduce Leah because she's one of my oldest and dearest friends. And obviously by oldest, I mean we've known each other for a long time because we're incredibly youthful still. Leah's been president of Mercy for Animals for the past year, and she's been fighting for better food and farming systems for nearly 20 years. She oversaw staff in more than 14 countries at the World Society for the Protection of Animals, now World Animal Protection, which is where we first met some 15 or so years ago. Prior to that, she worked at Compassion in World Farming. She really is one of the most strategic and also kindest individuals I know. And I think you'll learn a lot, and I hope you'll ask her some really challenging questions so that we can have a great conversation at the end of Leah's presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, and thank you especially to Chris and Sarah, who made it possible for me to be here today and moved mountains to make this room available, given the busy schedule, as it turns out, that the issues around animal interests are. So thank you all for coming and choosing to be here today. So, how many people have heard of Mercy for Animals before? All right, we're in good shape. Excellent, excellent. All right. Well, then you're going to know a little bit about our organization, our vision. So I took over about a year ago. Before that, for 8 years, I had been running Compassion in World Farming USA. And the first thing I did was work on a new strategic plan. So what you're going to see here is our new vision and our mission, which we've been working through in the last year or so. Our vision is very specific. It is a world where animals are respected, protected, and free to pursue their own interests. Who shares that vision? Who thinks that would be a nice world to live in? Yes. Somebody clap? Yeah, I want to hear like a woo, yeah, right? That's a good world. That's the world I want to live in. How are we going to do that is our mission. So our mission, and this is very specific wording that tells you a little bit about who we are. It is to construct a compassionate food system. And so we've chosen those words specifically, construct. So we are not just a destructive force, which is destroying factory farming, which is definitely bad, but we are also a positive force in the world. We really want to construct a food system that's good for everyone. And when I say everyone, I mean chickens, I mean communities, I mean eaters, I mean the planet, I mean wildlife, I mean everyone. And we want to do this in two ways. One is reduce the suffering of animals that are currently trapped in factory farming. There's 80 billion of them. So that means getting rid of things like cages and crates and genetics that drive animals to their metabolic limits. And the second part of that is ending the exploitation of animals for food altogether. That means a plant-based world. So that's who Mercy for Animals specifically is. Still following me? Everyone's good? All right, good. All right. 2 slides in, and I still have your attention. This is good. Okay. I'm going to tell you a little story. You guys ready for story time? All right, it's not nap time, not different, it's different. So in 2014, I found myself sitting across from a man who by every definition was my enemy. His name is Craig Watts, and he's a chicken factory farmer who brings chickens to slaughter. My career is devoted to protecting farmed animals and ending factory farming. And up until this point, I had spent every waking moment trying to fight against everything this man stood for. And now I was in his living room. And as I sat there, the questions were really swirling around in my head. Why had this man invited me? Why had I gone? And to be honest, I had been trying for many years to get footage from inside a chicken factory farm at a time when it is and was nearly impossible to get images like that out. And this was a last resort. I had no other options. I needed to get this footage out. And that day I had driven from my home in Atlanta to Craig's home in Fairmont, North Carolina. And I literally was convinced there was an ambush. There would be farmers with pitchforks, and they would be waiting for me. Why would this man invite me into his home and to see his farm? And I remember calling my husband on the way there and saying, okay, here's the address, because if I don't come back, look for me rotting away in the chicken litter. And that day did change my life forever. So that day, this man, the day I met him, Craig Watts, had been raising chickens for 22 years for a company called Purdue. They're the 4th largest chicken company in the country. And when he was a young man, he was searching for this way to stay on the land that had been passed down through 5 generations in his family in one of the poorest counties in rural North Carolina. There weren't a lot of jobs, so when the chicken industry came to town, he thought, this is a dream come true. So he took a $250,000 loan out, and with that money, he built some chicken houses. And he raised chickens for Purdue, and with the paycheck they gave him, he started to pay off that loan like a mortgage. But pretty soon, the chickens started to get sick. After all, it's a factory farm. And there's 25,000 chickens that are stuffed wall to wall in a warehouse, windowless, living on their own feces, breathing toxic ammonia air. And he started to struggle to pay off that loan. And when chickens get sick and they die, you don't get paid for them. So he started to fall behind on paying off that loan. And pretty soon, he realized he had made a mistake, and he wanted out. But he was all but an indentured servant at this stage. And by the time I met him, he had reached a breaking point. The payments seemed never ending, as did the death and illness and despair of the chickens. If we humans had tried to come up with a farming system that was horribly cruel and dirty and unfair, we really couldn't have come up with something as horrible as chicken factory farming or factory farming altogether. 80 billion farmed animals are raised and slaughtered in horrific conditions every single year, stuffed in warehouses, in cages, never to see the light of day. And that's not just a problem for the farmed animals, of course. Factory farming is responsible for more greenhouse gas emissions than the world's planes, trains, and automobiles put together. And 1/3 of our arable land is being used right now to grow feed for factory farmed animals instead of us humans. And that land is sprayed with immeasurable chemicals, and we are cutting down ecologically important habitats like rainforests, like the Amazon burning up right now. The way things are going, my 3 kids will never have the chance to see a wild polar bear, a Sumatran elephant. In my lifetime, the number of birds, amphibians, reptiles, and mammals has halved. And the main culprit is our global appetite for meat, dairy, and eggs. And up until that point, the main culprit, the main villain for me, was Craig Watts. But it's really easy to hate someone you've never met before. And as I listened to his struggles and his surprising hatred for a system that I also hated, my fear and my anger that I held towards him was replaced with something else. Shame. I felt ashamed. I had never once considered his struggle, his strife, the choices he had made in one of the poorest counties in rural North Carolina where there were no other job options. In fact, up until the point of meeting him, I had been only angry at him, blamed him and his people like him. In fact, I had wished him ill. I had wished he'd lose his job and not be able to feed his family as an angry animal rights activist. I had never once thought, could he be a potential ally? I had never thought, maybe he feels as trapped as the chickens. So at this point, Craig and I had been sitting there for hours, and midday had turned into afternoon to dusk to darkness. And suddenly he asked me, do you want to see the chickens? Why had he waited until darkness? He did not want to raise suspicion with his neighbors. He didn't want maybe his service tech to see me. There was a lot of risk for him as well, having me there. And so without further ado, he led me to a big gray house, and he swung open this wooden door, and we stepped in, and we were met with this overpowering smell. And I just remember every muscle in my body tensing up and my eyes tearing and coughing, and I was so overwhelmed with my own physical discomfort that I didn't even look around at first. But when I did, I was horrified. I was moved to tears. All around me were tens of thousands of newly hatched chicks in a windowless warehouse living on their own feces with nothing to do, nowhere to go. And I knew within a month that these sentient beings, no different than the cats that I love at home, would grow at a terribly fast pace. They would suffer and then end up on someone's plate in America. So over the next few months, I came back many, many times with my friend and filmmaker, Reagan Hodge. And I learned from Craig. I walked the houses with him as he explained the problems to me, as he picked up dead or dying chickens that had messed up legs, trouble breathing, couldn't walk at all. And all of these horrors, all of these conversations, we captured on film. And then we decided to do something I never expected to do. We decided to release that footage. And that was a big risk for both of us. For him, he risked losing everything. He risked losing his income, his land. He risked his neighbors hating him. Everyone around him raises chickens for Purdue. So he was outing the company that was providing income, food on the table for everyone around him. And I was afraid of getting my organization, Compassionate World Farming, the one I was working at then, sued. And I risked being responsible. I feared being responsible for him losing everything. But we decided to do it anyway. The New York Times broke the story, and within 24 hours, 1 million people had seen our video. It went viral. And suddenly we had this megaphone. Our unlikely alliance put the horrors of chicken factory farming on the map. And this really got me thinking, what other unlikely alliances are out there? Who else am I not sitting down with that I should be sitting down with to really understand the problem? And this led me to talk to an even bigger so-called enemy. And that was Jim Purdue himself, who had been the villain of my viral video. 2 years later, I got a call from Purdue, and they were interested in talking. I had been writing them, they had been stonewalling me, and they decided it's time to talk. We see some truth in what you're saying. And after a year of talking and trying to understand the problem, they put out the first animal care policy of any large poultry company in the United States. And through these really difficult conversations, once again, and kind of putting myself into this uncomfortable situation of sitting down with someone I thought I knew, I thought was the enemy, they agreed to do some things that we had criticized them in the video for not doing, like putting windows in those warehouses and paying for them, not making the farmers pay for them, but paying for them themselves. And through these conversations, I began to realize there's a lot of lessons that I can pull from these conversations. And that one in particular taught me that we have to be comfortable with being uncomfortable. That only talking to people who agree with us is not going to help us get to the solution. We have to push ourselves into that discomfort zone. And after all, these companies or your enemy often holds the power to solve the problem. And in this instance, I'm not in charge of a single chicken. Purdue is, the factory farmers are, not me. So if I want to solve the problem, I have to sit down with them to try to understand what's going on, to see what their obstacles are, try to break them down, try to build solutions with them, rather than just screaming from the outside about what they're doing wrong. Another lesson I learned doing this kind of work, a second lesson, is that as advocates, we're often very married to being principled. And we really like being right, and it's coming from a place of a moral place, moral value. And so what we often miss is that the person we're sitting down with is a human being. And quite often, that human being has a lot more in common with us than we would like to admit. And I'll give you an example. So I was invited to meet at one of the headquarters of one of the largest chicken companies in the United States. And it was the first time they had ever invited an advocate to come to their headquarters and really talk to them. So my coworker, Rachel Druskin, and I, we went in, we signed in, and literally there were people like looking over the cubicles at us and hiding because they wanted to see what we looked like. I don't know what they thought I look like this. Like, it's not, like, I look like them. Like, I think they were thinking lots of piercings and tattoos and like weapons maybe. I'm not sure. And as we walked in the conference room, there was the main executive in charge of the chickens, and he was sitting there. His arms were crossed, and he was looking at me like, don't care, don't like you. And I was nervous. I probably didn't exude a welcoming kind of feeling either. I was fumbling with my laptop, and I pulled it up, and as I did, the background of my laptop came up, and it was a picture of my kids. And my daughter clearly looks different than my two sons. And as I did this, he unfolded his arms, and he tilted his head, and he leaned forward, and he said, "Are those your kids?" And I said, yeah, I just got back from adopting my daughter. I'd only been back a month, and I was overwhelmed and feeling very emotional, so I really babbled on way too much for a professional meeting, and started talking about this. And he said, "Oh, well, I have two kids that are adopted from China." And we started talking about the ups and downs of that and raising kids, and for 20 minutes. And we totally forgot why we were at this table. And I can tell you, in those moments, the walls came down, a bridge was built, and we crossed a divide as two human beings. And that company was able to make more progress, I truly believe, because the trust was built in those moments, because we recognized the humanity in each other. The last lesson that I wanted to share with you from my work is that we have to look for the win-win when we sit down with the enemy. So instead of thinking, when I work with people like Craig or any type of factory farmer, instead of thinking, I want to put you out of business, I want to take away your income, I'm now trying to think, how can I help them evolve into a different type of farming, like mushrooms or hemp? And a farmer I later worked with did exactly that. So Mike Weaver of West Virginia worked with me on a very similar film. We exposed the cruelty and disease that was happening at Pilgrim's Pride. And we came out with a film. It was in the New York Times. And he went beyond that, though. Not only did he quit chicken factory farming, he decided to do something else. As it turns out, chicken warehouses are very useful for something else. They require the same climate control as hemp. That's hemp. It's an environmentally friendly way to stay on the land, which is the reason a lot of these farmers want to stay in rural America. And it's a win-win. It's the win-win that someone like me as an activist and user of CBD oil and a factory farmer can get behind. And these are the kinds of solutions we need to look for, these win-wins. So now instead of thinking, how can I put the meat industry out of business, I'm trying to think, how can I help them evolve into a different kind of business? What do businesses care about? That's how you have to come to the table. They care about their shareholders. They care about paying their employees, their brand, growing their business, meeting demand. Okay, so when you sit down with a meat company, how can we try to constructively have them evolve into a different kind of business? And it turns out companies that are mainly meat companies are starting to shift in that direction. I have to pinch myself about this point, but it's happening. So companies like Tyson, Cargill, and Purdue are moving in this direction. They are announcing they're exploring plant-based protein and incorporating it into their business model. Jim Purdue made a statement that said that our business model is to provide premium protein for the world, and nothing in that says it has to come from animals. That's crazy, and it's wonderful. And it's the win-win that we're looking for. And KFC is testing out plant-based chicken nuggets. I went to the opening of this. It opened at 10 o'clock in the morning, and me and the team were there at 10 sharp, and by the time I got there, you would think they were giving out Beyonce tickets for free because the lines were wrapped around the entire building. There was traffic stopped in all directions. It was mayhem. People are really ready for the shift, and companies are following that demand. It's a very exciting time to be alive. So my message to you really is, as we go out and try to change the world and make it a better place, we really need to build a tent that is big enough, that is wide enough for everyone, whether you be an animal rights activist, a factory farmer, or the chicken companies to be under. And frankly, these lessons apply big and small, whether you're talking about sitting down with an ex, a neighbor, a really annoying mother-in-law. I have a nice mother-in-law, because I know this is being recorded. I really do. Or really difficult causes of oppression and exploitation, like factory farming, or climate change, or racism, or misogyny. We will not win by beating down our enemies. We'll only win by finding the win-win and forging paths together. And the real lesson is that we have to stop thinking about solving these problems with a us versus them mentality, but realizing it's just one us and a system that is unjust, that's hurting all of us, and we have to solve it together. And I really think that it's very difficult to do this work. I'm not pretending it's easy. It's messy, it's uncomfortable, it's difficult, but I really feel it's critical, and it might be the only way to get to that compassionate food system and maybe world that we all deserve. Thank you.
All right, we've got some time for questions. So we're recording the event, so please wait till I get to you with the microphone before you ask your question.
I get the idea, and I understand what you're saying about making a social connection with potential adversaries. But in the example that you just showed, the farmer was distressed, and he was not making the profit that he wanted. And you could certainly show to him that maybe making a more humane environment with windows was going to keep his population of chickens healthier and therefore would help him in the bottom line. The question is, though, how do you impact a market or a business like that is doing very well and has high profits? And the example you gave about Purdue going to plant-based is simply, it's based on the market is changing. In other words, if everybody still was wanting chicken, they would not be necessarily making the change. So my question to you is, how do you work with industries that are doing very well and don't really see the need to change?
Very good question, and it's something we think about as campaigners and advocates all the time. So the simple answer is that we make the part that is unjust not do well. And we do that by exposing it for what it is. Their biggest Achilles heel is their brand and their PR. And poor animal welfare, cruelty, which we show through undercover investigations or the film that I put out, it exposes them and is negative PR. And they want to fix that because that affects their brand. It affects why consumers come to them. So when we did that, that viral video, I am no doubt in my mind that combined, so Mercy for Animals did 2 undercover investigations on Purdue during that year as well, as did Compassion Over Killing. So there were multiple hits on their PR that brought them to the table. And this causes them damage, and it makes them realize there's a problem. So exposing the problem in the PR work is very, very important. The other part of animal welfare that is effective and important is that it raises the prices of meat. So when we add windows and more space and breeds that grow slower, it means it's not as efficient, and it means chicken will cost more. And the basic laws of economics are that when price goes up, demand goes down. And we see this, we see this happening in the market all the time. So our job as advocates, by putting welfare measures in partially, is to raise the prices to make it really cost what it should cost, and then at the same time come in with a really awesome alternative, like the plant-based chicken nuggets, and have that be cheaper, as good, as available, as convenient, and eventually, hopefully, offset and drive consumers to that better option. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Thank you so much for your presentation. How do you advise people who are working full-time, not at an animal welfare organization who want to help animals? What's the most strategic way for people working full-time to help animals?
So there's a great website called mercyforanimals.org/donate. That's a great place. Just saying. Well, I do think that there's different ways you can help. You can donate, help organizations like ours. You can also sign up to any of the organization's activist sites. So the Humane League, Mercy for Animals, we have something called Hen Heroes. And you can sign up to that, and we will kind of corral your interest into targeting a company and then put pressure on that company to make changes. We have a big campaign running against Mod Pizza right now to get them to change their policy. So if you join our Hen Heroes, we send you actions that you can do either through social media or email or any other, or phoning, and we'll point you in the right direction to join our efforts to bring certain companies into line. So that's one way, and most organizations do. Did you have a follow-up?
Follow-up. So is leafleting also an effective way?
I don't believe in this day and age of digital that leafleting is an effective way, and we have really scaled back. We don't really do leafleting. A lot of our work is digital. It's faster, it's cheaper, but you should look up, Animal Charity Evaluators has some reviews of the effectiveness of leafleting, and you can find out for yourself, and you just Google effectiveness of leafleting animal rights, and you can find out the effectiveness of that.
Hi, thanks again for coming. This was really interesting. I am curious from sort of a strategic perspective as an advocate. I mean, are you, how comfortable are you, and how, do you have concerns about adopting what seems like a posture that's very sort of conciliatory with the industry that I think a lot of us would agree, and I think you would agree is sort of part of the problem? Because I could see sort of from one angle, there do seem to have been some very tangible gains that have come out of this, and those are exciting, but there's, I could also see a contrary perspective, and I mean this with all due respect, that would be that they've
Don't worry, I've heard it before.
that they've sort of successfully co-opted a much harsher critique with what could be described as fairly token measures.
Yeah, I've heard it before. There's been like Facebook campaigns against this kind of work. And my answer, so usually when I use an analogy to kind of talk about when welfare work is described as conciliatory or marginally better, right? And not, it's just like a PR move by Purdue. So the analogy I use is, imagine you are a prisoner on death row, and you're in a horrific prison. And would you prefer someone just work on ending your death sentence, or would you like them to work on both? Improving the welfare. You're looking at me like, no, I have a response to that.
No, I, as the death row inmate, would, but I think if we're taking a systemic perspective, the answer might be different. There might be sort of short-term costs we'd bear.
Right. So I morally do not think we should just abandon the 80 billion animals that are trapped in the system for the foreseeable future. And that's why Mercy for Animals' mission is to do both. So we are working both on ending the exploitation, ending the death sentence, and reducing the suffering. So for me, we make a lot of calculations. Does this reduce suffering? So for me, part of my personal mission is to reduce suffering on the planet. And I look at everything through that lens. Does this reduce suffering? And I have walked into those houses without the windows and more crowded versus the other ones. Absolutely. And scientifically, not just my opinion, it reduces suffering of those animals. So that matters. That matters to those animals times 80 billion. So we have to do both. And it's hard to, you have to kind of check your ego about that and be like, I believe in ending it. I will not take part in this system. It's a principle I've taken, a stance I've taken, the Mercy for Animals is taking, that a lot of social justice advocates have taken throughout history, and they have been criticized. But I think the historical path is, even if you look at Gandhi or Martin Luther King, they all took these approaches as they move forward. One thing that someone said to me recently that's a really good phrase is, empathy doesn't mean endorsement. So when I go to sit down with these companies, they know who I am. They know our goal is to end the factory farm, the industrial and agriculture altogether, animal agriculture altogether. They know that. We don't let up on that point. But we're also trying to move the needle. And staying stuck in the principle of like, it's black and white, it's all or nothing, doesn't help the 80 billion animals that are trapped.
Thank you.
Question here.
Good question.
Another example of that is Thurgood Marshall would talk about Plessy versus Ferguson being, as flawed as it was, while they're working to overturn it, they still were able to use Plessy as a huge club to go in and make sure things were at least equal while they were still hoping for, working on Brown to overturn it. So you can kind of do both at the same time. But another question.
With reference to the cost, I agree with your statement. I come from India, wherein more than 70 to 80% of Hindus and Buddhists, they do eat meat, even though the religion says not to, but still they eat. But they may eat just once a week or even once a month because of the cost. When compared to meat, the vegetables are less expensive.
Yeah.
So that is a supporting statement.
Thank
your
you.
thought.
Yes. Yeah.
And secondly, you may also include about health benefit. What happened to Bill Clinton recently? Almost to be a vegetarian or vegan.
Yeah. Yeah, we could give a whole lecture on the health benefits of plant-based eating, which sometimes resonates with people and sometimes they're like, I like my fried chicken, go away.
Hi, thanks for coming. I have been a fan of Mercy for Animals for a long time. I check the website every week, so I'm a very supportive.
You check the donate part? Checking.
That's for after law school.
Okay.
I'm wondering what you make of the argument put forth by some people who might endorse the type of mentality that Fred was gesturing to, not endorsing himself, but gesturing to.
Who's Fred? Are you Fred?
Yeah.
Okay. Hi, Fred. I got your name now. That's good.
So it's been said that the welfare reforms can drive up the price, but they can also drive down veterinary costs such that it ends up being a wash, basically. And there are others who have said that if you invest in the welfare reforms, you make people who would otherwise go vegan feel more comfortable consuming animal products because they think that the practices are sufficiently humane. I'm just wondering what you make of that.
So again, there's been some research on this. I don't have it to hand, but there hasn't been any true evidence about that latter point, about raising welfare makes people feel better. There isn't any actual research or evidence that's been on that. So I've really looked into it. It's been a big concern of animal rights advocates for a while. The main thing that drives people to eat meat in the form that it is price. Price point is, there's a, James McWilliams put out a really good paper, he's at University of Texas, I think. Does anybody know? Yeah. Texas, yeah. Just kind of saying it doesn't matter about anything we do. The only thing that matters is price. And that's, as long as meat continues to be really cheap, that's what people will do and buy, and they'll, for the majority. Like many of us in this room might have the privilege, either from whatever point of view, to think through where our protein's coming through and make those choices. But most people are running around, going to the supermarket, picking it off the shelf, like what's cheapest, what fits my budget, go, 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 right? And if something else is there that is made out of plants instead of animals, I don't think they're gonna care. That's the main, the economics seems to be the main driving principle for most. I don't know if that, I forget if that really answers your question. Okay.
We got a question back there. But one thing to point out, too, is that this price is sort of artificially low because of not only loans and subsidies to build out the facilities themselves, but also to grow the feed that goes into the animals. There's like a whole range of subsidies that are making it unfair.
Yeah, one of the main drivers of cheap chicken is cheap soy and subsidized soy. So you can, if you we followed the prices of soy, and it directly impacts the price of chicken. It's the biggest factor that, and I'm sure there's more people that are ag economists that know more about this than me, but it's a huge factor. And people often say, why don't we change the subsidies? We have tried. The Obama administration tried, and they failed. It's not an easy thing to tackle. So this is our best effort. Hi.
Hello. So thanks for this super inspiring talk. I can confirm, I've been working on social movement theory for years, and everything that you've said about coalition building and stuff like that just proves itself time after time in lots of things. But what I'm curious about is a lot of the solutions that you worked with the farmers on are unique to the chicken industry, just kind of like the conditions for chicken and hemp and what have you. Do we have a model for doing the exact same move, for example, for the cattle industry? Like, can this work for other aspects of animal ethics?
Yeah, I can't say that I'm an expert in the other areas. The only place I've started to explore this is in the dairy industry, where I do think it could apply. And I'm working with a particularly large company that does mostly dairy in Vermont You can guess which one that is. And if you've read the newspaper lately or you're into these issues, you can see that like suicide rates for dairy farmers in Wisconsin are an all-time high. The prices have dropped out. They don't know what to do. And they're starting to grow hemp, some of them. And that, I think, is another application that we could play with, and we're not. And I will tell you that Mercy for Animals on Monday is launching a new project called Transformation. Get it? Like that? Very excited. So check it out. We're doing an exclusive of The Atlantic, and it will be about helping farmers transition. It will focus on chicken farmers, but other farmers will be explored as well. And I think dairy is really ripe for that as well. I don't know about the cattle industry. It's tough, really tough. It's a different makeup, but yeah.
And Lee, what is the breakdown between the numbers? Let's say like the 9 billion in the U.S. What percentage are chicken?
Right. Which is, we focus on chickens, and I've in my career focused on chickens because it's 90% of all factory farmed animals are chickens, and I don't mean laying hens. I mean the chickens that end up being eaten for their meat. So it's, when you talk about animal agriculture, you're basically talking about chicken farming, and that's globally in terms of individual numbers of animals, not poundage of meat, but individual numbers. It's 9 billion in this country of the 10 billion are just meat chickens.
I don't know how to word this exactly. You touched on the costs. Is it, I guess I'm trying to say, is it not possible in the big picture for plant-based food to be less expensive than animal foods? And like I sometimes think, wouldn't it be better for McDonald's to give out, you know, if it was large-scale production of plant-based veggie burgers and
Well,
wouldn't it be cheaper? It just seems like raising these farmed animals it's not cheap no matter what they do. Isn't it possible that plant-based food would be cheaper? I guess that's.
yeah, I believe in principle it is, and I also believe that, and I'm not the only one who believes it, there's economic models that say as we scale up, the price will come down. So right now, it's such a small volume that's being produced, so the costs are quite high of the Impossible Burger and the Beyond Meat burgers. But as we get the equipment, the kind of, the bottleneck right now in that industry is around manufacturing. So the big equipment required to en masse, on volume, produce these products we don't have it yet. So there's huge investment going into that, and it's scaling up really fast. So I do think over time, the price will come down. And we haven't talked about this, but lab meat, or I forget what the term, there's a new term every week, but I think it's called now.
Cultivated?
Cultivated, thank you. Yeah, there's like a new cultivated. It was clean, now it's cultivated meat, so use that word and that word only. Cultivated meat, which is where you take a cell from an animal, and you grow it in a lab, in a brewery kind of scenario. Now that, I think, has the potential, if we crack the nutrient base feeding those cells, to be very cheap. You just use one cell in a nutrient base and boom, you're done. None of the inputs required of a slaughterhouse and factory farm and all of that. So in principle, I think it's just going to take time for the manufacturing to expand and the prices will come down.
Any other questions for Leah? Oh, here we go.
Oh, Jim. Hi, Jim.
Hi, Leah. If you could take the Leah Garcés crystal ball and look maybe when your kids are your age, combination of optimism and realism, dealing with the Jim Purdue's of the world, how do you think the animal food chain consumer market will look?
So, if you read my book, the epilogue is my optimistic vision. So my epilogue in my book, if you just want to skip right to there and feel really good, is me imagining it's 30 years since my book's been published. And I imagine my kids are grown up and they have their own kids and they're doing their digital shopping. And when they go into the aisle, the digital aisles, there's clean meat, bluefin tuna on the shelf and some plant-based nuggets, and there's a little bit of maybe regenerative agriculture on the shelf, maybe some, which is another type of farming where you we haven't, that's in the book too, you can read that there. So in my vision, in 30 years from now, there's clean meat and plant-based in 90% of the shelf. And Mercy for Animals is having a big party, and we're shutting down. And so are all the animal rights groups. And we've all gone to work in plant-based technology or clean meat technology, and we're really rich because we got in early, and we got all those IPOs and made a ton of money because we knew what was up early on. So that is my optimistic vision of the world. I do, the other, and part of that vision is also that the world starts to restore itself. Like the bees and butterflies we thought were extinct come back from the mountains, and wildflowers are back, and we restore the countryside. And I think the pressures on our environment are going to drive us there. Like the crisis we're in ecologically is going to force this, and it already is. Like the conversations that we're having today were not the ones we were having 5 years ago about animal ag is a key problem in this crisis we're in, and you hear that now. We didn't hear that. That wasn't a common knowledge, but it is now. So I feel, anyway, that's my optimistic view for 30 years from now.
First off, thank you for your words, your wisdom, and your advocacy. I do have a question. I was listening with great interest about your idea of raising the prices to lower demand. We've kind of seen this movie before in other realms, where what seems to happen is our problems get sent to other countries with fewer rules and lower standards. And I'm curious whether you've looked at that, because I know that's happening already. We're ending up with pigs and salmon and so on from Asia.
Very, very good point. So Mercy for Animals, we are working globally. So we have offices in India and Hong Kong, Brazil, Mexico, along with the United States and Canada. So we don't, this is not just a, I'm not saying this from a US perspective only. I'm saying this from a global perspective. So the principles I'm saying today apply everywhere. And a way as like, I'm assuming some of you are law students in here, just a guess. One important idea is that as countries raise the standards, that they do not permit the import of products that do not hold that standard. So for example, Prop 12 in California is saying not only are we banning cages and crates, but we're also banning the sale of those products. And time will tell whether this holds, because right now the North American Meat Institute is suing California for this, but we think it will. And it's important not just to, we can't allow the flood of products that don't meet the standards into the country. We also have to work in every country to get this standard. And in my book as well, in the end, in the epilogue, I also talk about a UN, like similar to our actions around climate change at the UN level, we have to have a global approach to this and recognize the impact it's having globally. It's not good enough to, and this has been going on for quite a long time. The Food and Agriculture Organization put out a paper in early 2000 called Livestock's Long Shadow, and it talked about this exact principle of all of factory farming is going to be moving into Brazil and China, and it has. 20 years later, it has. It's sad to see these things actually happen. And we can't just attack the problem from one country. It has to be a global effort for sure. So good point. Yeah.
Any other questions for Leah? All right. Well, please again join me in thanking Mercy for Animals President Leah Garcés for spending some time with us. Thank you.
Thank you.